Let's talk about Nick Diaz, shall we? Let's talk about Nicholas Diaz. I don't think I should call him Nicholas. So, at the fights this past weekend, or the weekend before, should I say, because we're now 2 weeks on from that, Nick Diaz was in attendance at UFC 261, which at first the crowd panned to Jake Paul, and he got a hell of a lot of abuse, and then it panned to Nick Diaz, and there was a big old cheer. And that kind of got everyone asking why Nick Diaz was there. Then Dana White does his post-fight press conference and says, I'm meeting with Nick Diaz in a minute. He's backstage waiting for me now. He wants to fight. So, what we usually see with the Diaz brothers is that they come in waves. You see them both fight, then you see them go away because they've made a little bit of money and they're not really interested in fighting. They want to go and do this and want to go and do that. And then one of them fights again, and then the other one comes back and fights. Now, Nick Diaz, of course, last fought against Anderson Silva, and I want to say that was back in 2015. Yes, it was 2015, which was a UFC 183, and it ended up being a no contest. Nick Diaz originally lost a decision to Anderson Silva, and it was overturned to no contest, and he was consequently given a 5-year ban for marijuana, which is hilarious because most athletic commissions have now removed that from their pool of illegal substances. So Nick Diaz then had that overturned eventually, but ironically ended up still sitting out for 5 years. Fast forward to UFC 261 and he wants to fight. Now, the question is, who does he fight? For some reason, everybody thinks he should be fighting Khamzat Chimaev. I don't buy into that. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't know why it's marketable. All it would be for the UFC is pushing a new star into Nick Diaz. Nick Diaz most likely losing, and I'm only saying that because the guy hasn't fought in 6 years, or 5.5 years, and it's unlikely that you get better by not doing something. Whereas Khamzat Chimaev has had 3 fights in a year. Yes, he might have had 3 or 4 months, 5 months, 6 months off due to COVID, but he's more active than Nick Diaz. So you'd like to assume that Chimaev would win. So I don't want to see that. Then I ask myself, who else could he fight? And there's a couple of names that interest me. The first one is Carlos Condit, because of his last 3 fights in the UFC, they were to GSP, Anderson Silva and Carlos Condit, and he lost all 3 of them. But the Carlos Condit fight was compelling then, and I think it's even more compelling now, when Condit is just coming towards the end of his MMA journey, and Nick Diaz, I guess, is trying to restart his, and we're looking to see where we put Nick Diaz. Is he also at the end of his MMA journey, or has he got a little bit more left in the tank? And I think the fact that they've already fought makes that really compelling. There's another name, Dan Hardy. Dan Hardy hasn't fought in 7 or 8 years. He's obviously been close to the sport and within the sport, and he's been a pundit of the sport, and he is also a big student of the sport, but he has no affiliation or history with Nick Diaz. And Nick Diaz has no affiliation or history with Dan Hardy. I don't even think they've uttered 2 words to each other apart from recently on Twitter. So, I know Dan Hardy's looking for a comeback fight, but for me, I'm not interested in watching Nick Diaz versus Dan Hardy. And it is all about me. The next name I've got for you is Jorge Masvidal. Now, this is one of my favourites. And the reason it's one of my favourites is because, obviously, Masvidal beat up Nathan Diaz about 1.5 years ago. Back at UFC... maybe 249? That's a guess. I'm probably wrong. It doesn't matter. You remember the event. It was at New York, BMF belt on the line, and that was where we sort of really saw Masvidal kind of crown off the end of his 2019 in only the way he knows how, shall we say. Obviously, Nate Diaz ended up losing by TKO, which is unusual for a Diaz brother, but it was more due to a cut than it was to a stoppage. However, there was no question about who was winning that fight. And I do know that the Diaz brothers like to sort of put it on in the last 2 or 3 rounds, but he was getting the hell beaten out of him. So does Nick want to avenge his younger brother's defeat? And that's the story for this fight. You can do Masvidal versus Nick Diaz, and then you can circle back round and do Masvidal versus Nate Diaz 2, regardless of the result. And that, for me, is one of the better fights that we could have. The last one I'm going to bring to you is Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler, of course, fought Nick Diaz back in 2004, and Nick Diaz knocked him out. If you haven't seen the fight, go and watch it. It's great. But for me, that's a good sell for Robbie Lawler to try and avenge that loss. It's a good comeback fight for Nick Diaz because it's someone like Carlos Condit who's at a similar point of his career. So when you ask me, do I want to see Nick Diaz versus Khamzat Chimaev? No. I want to see Nick Diaz versus Robbie Lawler or Jorge Masvidal, and I'll let you lot pick. I'm not fussed. But it definitely should be one of those two names.